Council are present. All members who are adjourned or alternates are present or witnesses back on the witness stand. And Ms. Jarvis, you may resume your examination.
Thank you. You had an opportunity to review that section of the transcript from an interview that you gave the detectives in San Bernardino some time ago. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And when you testified yesterday, you indicated that it was a pretty normal thing that happened with Joseph and Chase and within his relationship that he would have checks, right?
Yes.
And when you reviewed the actual transcript, and you testified also, right, that you never actually saw the checks that day.
Correct.
And he was the one that just told you that he had 3 checks, right?
Yes.
And when you testified yesterday, you indicated that that was normal for him to come home with checks on other occasions, right?
Yes.
Were you ever aware of the defendant signing Joseph's name on checks?
I believe I told investigators that, yes.
And was that something you knew on that particular date, on the 4th? On February 4th, when the defendant came home with checks?
Yes.
You knew that he was signing Joseph's name?
I didn't know if he was signing Joseph's name on those checks, but that he had signed his name, yes.
So you're saying he had signed his name on checks previously?
I believe so, yes.
They did not have the account together, right?
No, they did not.
And the defendant was not a co-signer on the account, was he?
No, he was not.
And do you remember testifying previously that Joseph would just transfer money to Chase? I'm sorry, that you, let me strike that. You remember telling the detectives previously that Joseph was transfer money to Chase?
Yes, after Chase set up an account at the same bank, yes.
And do you remember telling the investigator that Joseph actually signed the checks but would leave the amount blank?
Yes.
So, is that incorrect what you told the investigator then?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay, so you testified that you learned that the defendant signed his name on some checks, right? That he received on the 4th.
Okay. You're saying that Chase signed some of Joseph's checks on the 4th, and I was aware of that?
Yes, I asked you that.
I wasn't.
Objection to the state's testimony.
Sustained as vague.
Let's go ahead and back it up. So you were aware that the defendant got 3 checks, right?
Yes.
On the 4th.
On the 4th, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. And those checks were blank, right?
I don't know. I never saw the checks.
Okay, well, the defendant told you that he had the checks from Joseph, right?
Yes.
And he said that Joseph gave him the checks, right?
Yes.
And he said that Joseph wrote the checks, right?
Objection to the state's testimony.
Overruled, you can answer.
Joseph gave him the checks. I don't know whether he specified he wrote the checks, but I know he had checks from Joseph. That's.
Do you recall telling the investigator when you were interviewed that Joseph had given the defendant checks and that Joseph had written the checks?
I don't believe it was specifically talking about the checks from the 4th. I think he was just talking in general about checks given to Chase.
And you say he, you're referring to the investigator?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, you were talking to the investigator about, prior to that, about phone records and you trying to get a hold of him, and that would have been February 4th, right?
Correct.
And then the next question that he asked you is, did he
Can
come
counsel
up?
direct us to a page?
Sure. It's page 34 on page 10. And the next question he asks you is, did he come up with checks from Joseph? Do you recall that being asked of you?
I read the transcripts. Yes. That was asked of me.
And you responded that you never saw checks from Joseph, right?
Never saw the checks from the 4th from Joseph, correct.
So you're talking about the 4th that day then, right?
Objection to the state's testimony.
Overruled.
I'm not understanding what so you're saying that everything, all the checks that we're talking about in that conversation had to do with the 4th, which was not my understanding at the time. We went back and forth between what was the business relationship between Chase and Joseph and how things were.
Let me ask you a question. You had seen plenty of checks from Joseph before, right?
Yes.
In fact, you had seen checks that were made out directly to you from Joseph, right?
Yes.
And you had deposited many other checks for the defendant on other occasions, right?
Yes.
And those were all from Joseph.
Yes.
Okay? And so when he asks you specifically about not being able to get a hold of the defendant on the 4th, and then asking you when you saw the defendant, did he have checks? You're telling us you thought he was referring to something other than February 4th?
No.
So he's talking about February 4th, right?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled as her understanding of the questions at the time and what she was answering. Overruled, she can answer.
It's not specified in the interview what checks he was referring to.
Let me go through the transaction again. So he tells you the phone records about you trying to get a hold of him, and maybe your memory.
Correct this to the line.
33, lines 20 through 23. And maybe your memory wasn't exactly correct on that, and he asks you about the vehicle, the phone, anything else,
Can we have,
and that you
Your
respond.
objection sheet is misquoting this, at least the transcript we have.
I don't know which transcript.
Overruled.
And then he asks you, did he come up with checks from Joseph? Or did he have computer stuff? Anything said, I need to get rid of, or something, do you remember? And you responded, I never saw checks from Joseph.
Again, Your Honor, it's
What
not
date?
context, Your Honor. It's not specific as to the date. The section is referring.
Overruled.
What date are you referring to when you tell the investigators that you never saw checks from Joseph?
The date of the 4th.
Okay, so then the investigator says, when he told you he had the checks from Joseph, did he say that Joseph gave him the checks? And you responded, uh-huh. Still on the 4th, right?
I don't know.
Well, if that's the very next question that he asks you, is it reasonable to think he's referring to a completely different date?
Again, I
Objection, assumes the text not intended.
If that objection is sustained as calling for speculation and conclusion.
Nobody ever brought up any other date during that part of the conversation, right?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
For Department Unit 7.163 announcement.
You can look at lines 4 through 7, and then the very next lines that talk about those checks. The next question. There's no mention in there of changing the date or asking about any other date, right?
Objection. Counsel testifying.
Overruled.
No, but it says that he wrote the checks, and how would I know if I hadn't seen them? I mean, I wasn't referring to those specific checks.
What were you referring to?
Checks in general.
But you have seen multiple checks before, right?
Yes.
Objection, absent answer. 352.
Overruled.
And he indicated also that Joseph wrote the checks, and you responded that he signed the checks. Some of them weren't filled out because they were stuff that Chase needed to purchase. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And he specifically asked you if Joseph signed the checks and then would leave the amount blank, and you responded, right. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And then he asked you, are you aware of Chase ever having his own checks for Joseph and writing his own checks? And you responded, no. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So the only dates that you've talked about so far that you remember the defendant coming home with checks would be the February 4th date. And those would be checks that the defendant filled out, right?
Objection, misstatement testimony.
The investigator then asked you if he ever told you that he wrote checks for Joseph. Do you recall him asking you that?
Yes.
And you responded after, yes. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you say after, and you respond yes, what do you mean by that?
After, okay. You're specifically talking about Chase writing checks?
Yes.
After the family went missing, Chase told me that he had written out checks, and I wasn't aware that he had.
So that was a surprise to you.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why when the investigator asked you about what he said, you responded that he said that he did sign some checks. He signed Joseph's name on some checks, and I was like, you did? And then you responded again that you never told me that, meaning the defendant never told you that, right?
Right.
And you also said that wasn't a practice. Do you recall telling that to the detective?
Him signing checks, right?
And then he asked you specifically how many checks. And you indicated he didn't say how many checks there were. Do you recall telling the detective that?
Yes.
Okay, but now you specifically remember there being 3 checks?
Again, I wasn't referring to, because you just specified in there every check, and then, I mean, we weren't talking about a particular day then. We were just talking about Chase having written checks or Joseph having signed checks. What was the business practice between them?
And the business practice was not for the defendant to sign Joseph's name on checks, right?
Objection, argumentative, assumes facts not necessary.
Overruled.
Not that I knew of.
But you're aware that he did it on that particular occasion, right?
No, I was not.
Well, you were made aware of it after the fact by the defendant,
I
right?
wasn't aware that the investigator was specifically talking about the checks before.
Well, your conversation with the investigator starts out talking about checks that you didn't see on the 4th, right?
Right.
And then you continue talking about those checks. He asks you additional questions about those checks, right?
Well, my understanding is, why would he be asking me about checks that I had never seen?
Okay, well, he does ask you about your conversation with the defendant with respect to those checks, right?
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Okay, and you indicated that you were not aware that the defendant had ever signed his name on any checks from Joseph until he signed his name on the checks that he received on the 4th, right?
That is not specified. I was not aware he had signed Joseph's name on checks, ever.
Well, let me show you the top of page 36. And if you can read the first half of that page.
This part right here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, there's no mention of a change of a different date, right?
No.
And the investigator is specifically asking you about checks that Joseph signed, or that the defendant signed in Joseph's name, right?
I'm not aware of him specifically talking about checks for that specific date.
Okay, so my question to you is, he asked you about the defendant signing checks, right?
Yes.
And you told him that you were not aware of the defendant signing any checks until after your interview with him, right?
Until after Chase told me that he had signed checks of Joseph's.
So it's your testimony now that it wasn't referring to those checks on the 4th, that it was some other date?
I don't know.
But you didn't tell the investigator you didn't know what date it was, right?
No, I didn't.
And you also knew that the defendant did not like Summer, right?
Yes.
And he didn't like her because what?
I don't specifically.
Sustained.
Did the defendant ever tell you why he doesn't like Summer?
I mean, he felt that she was too controlling of Joseph, that, I guess, well, he had personal conversations with Joseph and some of that had to do with, stresses Joseph was feeling over, being controlled to a point, I guess, by Summer.
If he had been around and the conversations that you had with him were dealing with times that he had been around Joseph and Summer together, right?
You're referring to Mr. Merritt?
Yes. When the defendant was around Joseph and Summer.
That didn't happen often. I mean, he was only around Summer on occasions where he went to pick up checks or pumps or whatever from Joseph, and it's not like they hung out together.
Well, the defendant would come home and those times that he was around Summer, he would complain about her, right?
On occasion, yes.
And he would tell you that he would never put up with that kind of talk to him, right? Him being the defendant.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, do you recall saying that?
No, I mean, not specifically.
Page 3 and then page 9. You can look at lines 11 through 16. Right there. Here now. Lines 11 through 16.
Okay.
And did you tell the detective that the defendant would never put up with that kind of talk?
Apparently, yes.
I want to go over the night of the 4th. You indicated and testified as well that the defendant came home that day before it got dark, right?
Yes.
And again, this would be Exhibit 439C. I'm going to direct you to the calls that happened that night. And these are the defendant's phone records. And if you can look starting at, we'll start with call 9073. So we see that these are the defendant's phone records, and the 949 number again is Joseph's number, and the 909-374-0102 is the defendant's number, right?
Yes.
So that first phone call that we see at 4:18 that lasts for 2 minutes and 11 seconds, do you know if the defendant was home when he received that phone call?
I'm not sure.
And how about the one that occurs right after that, call 9074, that lasts for 9 seconds between Joseph and the defendant? Do you recall if he was home for that phone call?
I don't know.
Well, at 5:47, we see another phone call, and 5:48. Do you see those two calls?
Yes.
If we're going off of what you testified to, that the defendant was home before dark, he would have been home before 5 on February 4th.
Yes.
And we see a phone call from Joseph to the defendant that lasted for 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Do you see that?
Yes.
So that would have occurred while he was home, right?
Great. Which
It's
one?
9076. See that one?
Yes.
Do you recall that phone call?
No.
So you don't remember that phone call on the 4th?
No.
And then we see a series of calls from you, 9077, 9078, and then Taylor's number is 9079, 9080, 9081, and 9082. Do you see all of those calls?
Yes.
And those calls occur between 6:09 PM and 9:04 PM, correct?
Yes.
And that's you trying to get a hold of the defendant, right?
Yes.
And were you able to talk to him?
I don't remember.
So you don't remember that part of February 4th either?
No.
Do you recall where you were when you made those phone calls?
At home.
Do you recall where the defendant was?
At home.
So he was at home and you called him all those times?
I believe so, yes.
So if you don't remember these phone calls, how do you remember that he was at home?
Because I had a discussion with him that night about him not picking up his phone.
Okay, and again, I'm going to just refer you back to the interview that you had with the detectives where you indicated to them that you could be wrong and mistaken about that, right?
Objection, the state's the third testimony.
Oh,
Yes.
And in fact, you told them that he,
Counsel referred to a page.
page 16, and then page 60 at the top. 16 in the interview, and then page 60 at the top. And the detective talked to you about the fact that you had been trying to call him between 5:30 and 9 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And you didn't even remember doing that, right?
No.
So it's your testimony now, though, that you remember that you were both at home?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. The witness can look at what she's referring to, so the witness can put it into context. And the counsel can also refer to the exact transcript that she's looking at.
no, the last objection is overruled.
You want to read lines, right here on page 60, read lines 12 to 25. Does that refresh your recollection of your conversation with the detective?
Yes.
And he talks to you about the fact that you've been trying to call the defendant between 5:30 and 9 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And he asks you, what happened that night? Where did he go, right?
Yes.
And how did you respond?
I said I don't know.
So that day, when you were interviewed by the detectives, you didn't know where he was. But as you sit here today, you now know where he was, right?
That is
Your Honor,
incorrect.
I'm objecting, and counsel should allow her to
Oh,
review the
last-
pages before and after.
So last.
I don't need to see the
Just a minute,
pages. I know what happened.
Wait, yeah. The last objection is sustained before the meeting.
Well, you told the detectives that you didn't know, right?
Yes.
And then today you're testifying that you know he was at
Objection,
home,
argument.
right?
Yes.
Overruled.
And you in fact told the detective, when he asked you if he was gone, you said, well, I was trying to get a hold of him, then obviously, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you also told the detective that maybe the phone call you remembered was a different night. You remember telling the detective that?
Yes.
And then you finally get a phone call from him that occurs at 9:32 p.m., right? You see the next call?
Yes.
And you had a conversation with him, right? And he wasn't at home when he called you, was he?
Yes.
Yes, he was at home?
Yes. I believe so.
And so there was testimony that his phone was hitting off of a tower in Riverside. Can you explain that?
No, I
Objection,
can't.
the
Objection, the
state's
state's
Objection sustained upon speculation and conclusion.
Well, the two of you had a conversation about that phone call, right?
Yes.
Well, we listened to the visit, right?
Yes.
Call that? And in fact, the defendant told you specifically himself he didn't even remember that phone call, right?
Right.
Didn't remember the call at all, right?
Right.
So it's your testimony that the defendant was still home all night on the 4th?
Yes.
Now, after February 17th, you changed phone carriers, right?
I don't know for sure.
You don't recall that?
No.
Were you aware of a documentary that's being done?
Yes.
And how were you made aware of that?
And our object is outside the scope.
Overruled.
Chase told me
What did Chase tell you about that?
that there was a documentary. He was talking to somebody about doing a documentary.
And were you aware of any facts that the defendant could potentially profit from that?
Objection. The honest scope is not relevant to this case.
As phrased, the question calls for speculation, so suspended.
Prior to this occurring, did you receive child support from the defendant?
Objection. Relevant.
Not on a regular basis.
But he would help you out financially, right?
Yes.
And after this occurred, you didn't receive any more financial support from him, right?
That's not true.
How would he support you financially?
Well, he would give me money for the kids, or if I asked for it.
After he went into custody,
Oh, after he went.
was he able to provide you
No.
any financial support? And he talked to you about the documentary, right?
Yes.
And did the defendant ever tell you that he could benefit financially from the documentary?
Objection. Irrelevant.
Overruled.
I don't think it was specified if it was from the documentary. There was a lot of things going on. There was a lot of media attention.
So he indicated to you different sources of revenue that he hoped to make off of this case, right?
Objection. Argument.
Overruled.
He assumes facts, not evidence.
Overruled.
I suppose so, yes.
Was one of those the documentary?
Again,
Speculation, Your Honor.
I don't think the doctor.
Just a minute. Again, as phrased, the objection is sustained as on speculation and conclusion.
What were the specific sources that he told you he was going to use to make money off of this case?
Objection. Assumes facts, not evidence.
Overruled.
He was talking about a book deal and interviews that could be potentially happening after the case was over.
And did you participate in the documentary?
Yes,
Were you interviewed for it?
yes.
Were you paid for it?
I was reimbursed for parking and gas, yes.
Were you ever promised any money in the future for your participation in the documentary?
No, I was not.
Did the defendant ever tell you that he would give you proceeds from the documentary?
No, he did not.
What's the nature of your relationship with the defendant currently?
We're friends.
And would it be fair to say that the defendant has indicated to you that he's still interested in a romantic relationship with you?
Objection. Relevant.
Overruled.
Yes,
And he indicated to you that he still loves you, right?
yes.
And in fact, when you testified earlier this morning and got off the stand, he winked at you and smiled at you, right?
I did not see that.
Just returning briefly to the phone records from the court, it's your testimony that there was a call received by the defendant at 8:28 that day, right? And this is
Objective.
exhibit
Unobjected, ask and answer. Too much go over past.
Sounds like it's foundational, the subsequent questions, so overruled.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
And 439C, which we have up on the screen, you indicated that the defendant got a phone call that night from Joseph, right?
Yes,
And that was sometime around 8 or 8:30?
yes.
And these are the defendant's phone records. Can you show me where that call is on here?
No,
Why?
because it's not on there.
And you were trying to get a hold of the defendant from between basically 6:09 to 9:04, right?
Yes,
And so we see a call from 7:18, right?
yes,
And another call at 9:04, right?
yes,
No call around the 8:30 time period, correct?
correct.
And it's your testimony that the defendant was home at that time when you made those calls.
I believe so, yes.
And where was he?
I don't know. He could have been someplace else on the property, such as the business center at the clubhouse.
So for 3 hours, you're trying to get a hold of him, but you couldn't walk to the clubhouse that 256 feet?
I don't believe he was gone that entire time. It was back and forth.
I have nothing further.
You remember interrupt?
Yes. We'll just start at the 8:30 phone call that counsel is referring to. She has just referenced phone records that belong to Chase, correct?
Yes,
And she showed you that. And she pointed out to you that at 8:30, Chase's phone records don't show a call around 8:30 p.m. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. And you had, when you were interviewed in 2014, in October of 2014 by the detectives from San Bernardino, you hadn't seen any phone records, had you?
No,
And they talked to you about that 8:30 phone call, right?
yes,
Because you told the detectives that you specifically saw Joseph's call because you saw his name on Chase's phone, correct?
yes.
Objection leading.
Sustained.
What did you tell the detectives about that 8:30 phone call?
I told them that I know that there was a call that came in that night because Chase didn't answer it. And I saw who was calling.
And in that interview in October, you recall what the detectives that interviewed you said about your statement that you saw Joseph's call. Did they believe you?
No, they did not.
And how long was that interview? Was it multiple hours?
Yes,
Did many of the hours that you sat through that interview, did they accuse you of lying about that 8:30 phone call?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
yes,
Now, the date in which it occurred, the 8:30 phone call, what counsel was referring to when you weren't sure of the date, they were talking about that 8:30 phone call, correct? And they pulled out phone records for you to look at, correct?
yes,
And they pulled out Chase's phone records and they put them in front of you.
Objection
said, "Look."
leading.
Sustained.
Did they pull out phone records?
yes.
What phone records did they pull out?
I don't know. It just showed calls.
And they pointed out to you, did they point anything out to you in the phone records?
Yes,
What did they point out to you?
that there were calls back and forth between Chase and I that looked like I was trying to get a hold of him, and he wouldn't be home if I was trying to get a hold of him.
We're going to get to those. What did they point out to you about the 8:30 phone call that you were telling them you saw?
No, it doesn't show up on Chase. It doesn't show up on the records. Therefore, it didn't happen.
And they therefore were saying that you were lying, correct?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
And you told them that you weren't lying, right?
Yes,
Objection leading.
Overruled. Maintained.
Did they show you Joseph's phone records?
no, I don't believe they did.
All right, I'm going to show you Joseph's phone records.
Is it my computer? Is it at 793?
Is it 793? So we'll go to that February 4th date. I want you to look at about 8:30, 8:28 p.m. You see that?
Yes.
And these are Joseph's phone records. What, do you remember?
Objection, is counsel testifying these are Joseph's phone records?
That's the exhibit that you introduced.
Overruled.
Okay. You know what Jason's phone number was in 2010 in February?
Yes.
What was it?
909-374-0102.
What does Joseph's phone record show at 8:28 p.m.?
That there was a call that came in.
They and the detective did not show this to you, is that correct?
Yes.
So even though they were confronting you with a phone record that didn't show a call, you still said that you saw that call.
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
Yes.
No, with a strike.
Oh,
How was
Yeah, it's on. The answer remaining.
how was that interview going forward? That October.
difficult.
They called, you were basically saying that you were lying.
Objection,
Objection
leading.
leading.
Sustained. And cumulative.
Talk about the series of phone calls at 6 o'clock. Did they go over those phone calls with you as well?
Yes.
The council said it was exhibit 939C.
439.
439C.
439C is on the bottom, exhibit 794 on the top. Here's,
Let's do one at a time.
439C.
So, so the detectives go over these phone calls. So they had Chase's phone records, correct?
I guess so. I don't know if they were mine or his or,
Okay. But they were showing you phone records of calls between you and Chase at about 6 o'clock. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And counsel just went over some phone calls with you. Is that correct? About that time period?
yes.
Okay. So if we look at call 9077 at 6:09 p.m., do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. It basically shows a lapse.
Objection, leading.
Well, do you see how long that call was? Do you see how long that call is?
Said 5 seconds. You're talking about
We're just
90?
trying to get the highlighter going on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 seconds.
Do you know whether or not you actually talked to Chase in that exchange?
I don't know.
Okay. And now let me show you I'm going to show you your phone records.
Objection, lacks foundation.
I'm going to show you exhibit 794.
Well, the lax foundation should not be published to the jury, it's not evidence.
It is 794.
What the hell you got that from?
You just have to. And if we can do it on the foundation, I think the foundation's been covered
With witness David Lipinski.
from 18th.
All right, council approach.
You don't take the picture, set about that.
Let's wait for the reporter to get back. All right, the last objection is just the lack of foundation.
Instead of transferring everything onto the laptop, we have to just come in and
Sure.
make foundation.
Sure.
Ma'am,
We want to step back, I want you to take a look at something on the computer screen.
I'm gonna have you look at, on the computer here, exhibit. We're gonna show you what we think is 794. We're gonna see if we recognize the number that's associated with those records.
Yeah.
You recognize that as your phone number and calls that you would have made from your phone.
Yes.
And so you see the originating number, you see that column?
Yes.
And you see that the originating number in many occasions is that phone number.
You're both going to need to keep your voices up if you want us to hear you.
You can see that the originating number for those calls is your phone number, is that correct?
Yes.
And you would say that those identify your records, is that correct?
Yes.
So I think we're dealing with exhibit 794 today. Well,
Make it a new,
we're going to create a new exhibit number with the permission for the next in order.
Okay. 989. You know, our numbers don't go up to 999.
Okay, we'll be conservative.
They think I'm kidding.
We just looked at the series on Chase's phone records for we'll call it the 6 o'clock calls on February 4th, 2010. Do you recall that? We were just looking at those.
Yeah.
Okay, you said that that first call showed it was about 5 seconds and that you didn't actually remember if there was actual conversation, correct?
Correct.
We'll look at what you've identified as your records and what we have now is exhibit 989. And if we look at that corresponding time, your phone record indicates a call number 5561 at 6:09 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the number that you call would have been Chase's, correct?
Yes.
And that also shows a 5 seconds, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, you don't know if you actually had a conversation. About a minute later, there's another call, is that correct?
Yes.
From you to Chase's number, correct?
Yes.
And it says 4 seconds there.
Yes.
Do you know if there was an actual conversation between you and Chase at that time?
I don't know.
Okay. And the next call at 5563 at 6:17 shows 5 seconds as well.
Yes.
And do you know if there was actual conversation there?
I don't know.
So 6:20, there's call 5564. Do you see that?
Yes.
That one shows 0. Do you know if that was any conversation there?
I don't know.
Okay. And, well, that would not have been your call, correct? That's another number?
Yes.
Okay. The next one at call number 5565, calling that number back, so that's not Chase, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then 5566, that's not the Chase either, is that correct?
Correct.
5567 would have been the next call, is that correct?
Yes.
And that says 4 seconds.
Yes.
Do you know if there was actual conversation there?
I don't know.
Okay. And then a call at, what would be the next call to Chase's number? Would that be call 5570?
Yes.
Okay. And then that's those 4 seconds, correct?
Yes.
Do you know if there was actual conversation there?
I don't know.
Okay. And then counsel asked you about the 9:30 phone call, correct? And that 9:30 phone call, you recall, and your testimony was that Chase was at home at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you say home, you mean in your... What did you mean by home?
Well, he probably was in the vicinity of home because I don't remember him leaving that night.
Speculation.
Overruled.
Now, let's go back to the phone call at 8:28. that You said when Joseph called and you saw Joseph's number, okay? And you saw his name, I'm sorry.
Objection, Ms. Major testimony, she said Browning.
Overruled.
You said that there was an argument after that, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, did I hear you correctly earlier as well that Chase tries to avoid confrontation?
Objection.
Did you testify to that earlier?
Testimony.
Overruled, you can answer yes or no.
I don't remember testifying that he avoids conflict. I don't know if that was in one of the transcripts that you're referring to or...
Was there, when you argue, does Chase argue back, or does Chase kind of shy away from
He kind
arguing?
Objection, meaning and relevance.
Overruled.
he kind of brushes it off.
Okay. Is one of the traits that Chase has that frustrates you is Chase
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Chase will walk away
Objection leading.
Overruled.
when you bring up important topics or argue with him about what you believe are important topics.
He doesn't walk away from conversations, really. He just kind of just brushes it off.
Is it conceivable after the argument regarding the phone call?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
After the argument that you had, how long did the argument last?
I'm not sure. I mean, at least a few minutes.
Do you know if Chase left to go to the clubhouse after their argument?
I don't know if he went to the clubhouse. He didn't leave home for any extended period of time.
The 9:30 phone call that we see here that Chase makes to you, would that be consistent with Chase being at the clubhouse? Since you said he had left.
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
So we're going to go back to Chase's records. Counsel asked you about a series of phone calls around the noon hour. Do you recall that?
Yes,
On the 4th,
yes,
February 4th, 2010.
yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go to those records. And she showed you just a portion of the screen. And I'm going to expand it out, okay?
Okay.
So we can see. And then we'll blow up each one if need be. So let's see which one she began with. We'll start at 9:00. 9037. You see that call?
Yes.
So that would have been the call. You recognize that as Chase's number calling your number?
Yes.
Okay, and that would have been at 12:09, correct?
Yes.
And it's lasts for 2 minutes and 53 seconds, correct? Now, I think that whether it was this one or another call, she made the comment that obviously he hadn't started lunch with Joseph at that time. Do you recall her making that kind of a comment?
Yes.
Was it uncommon for Chase to be meeting with Joseph and also speaking with you?
No, it was not uncommon.
That would be a normal thing, correct?
It happened, yes.
And when Chase is with you, even having lunch with you or with the kids, Chase will be on his phone.
Yes.
Is that fair to say? Is Chase on his phone all the time?
Yes.
So is Chase on the phone when he's at lunch with you?
Yes.
Is Chase on the phone if he's having lunch with the kids?
Yes.
Okay. Before we go down the 12 o'clock calls, I want to go back to the morning, 9013. Call 9013. That would have been at 9:15. You see that?
Yes.
That would have been a call that you made, that Chase made to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that looks like it lasted for 3 seconds. If we look in the right-hand column, there's a series of letters there. Do you see the M2M and the,
Yes.
and the DIR?
Yes.
Did anybody
Objection, speculation.
did anybody
I hadn't heard the question.
did anybody explain to you what those were?
No.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Looks 9014. Time is 9:52, and that looks like the call that you're calling Chase back. Is that correct?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay. And then at 9, then it looks like that lasted for 1:23. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then there's another call at 9:54 a.m. and that's call number 9015.
Yes.
And oh, so okay. So there's a call in the morning. There's an exchange between you and Chase in the morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to the 12 o'clock calls. We started out with 9:04 was our next one. That was at 12:28, correct? And that's a call from Chase to, no, that's not. That's a call from Chase to Joseph, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And then the next call is Joseph to Chase, correct? And that's for 5 minutes and 24 seconds.
Yes.
And then 9041, that's a call from Chase to you, is that correct?
You actually asked and answered cumulative.
Oh,
Yes.
And then it looks like there's a 20-minute break, and then there's a call from Joseph to Chase, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when counsel went over these records with you, you were just shown, she just went over Chase's records, correct? These 12 o'clock phone calls. She didn't go over any other records with you just now, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'm gonna go to yours now, that we newly labeled as 989, okay? And we look at those same 12 o'clock phone calls, all right?
Okay.
Because when you were asked before whether or not there was conversation, you didn't know because the seconds were 5 seconds,
Section
4 seconds.
16.
So let's go to your phone record. Again, it's 989. And we'll go to those 12 o'clock phone calls. And we'll start at, let's say, start at 12:54 p.m., so call 5536. Do you see that?
Yes.
And there's 3 in a row. Oh, let's start then at 5533. That one is at 12:52, correct?
Yes.
And that's a call from Chase to you?
Yes.
What's the time of that call on your records?
12:52.
What's the call of the time, the time frame of the elapsed time section of that call?
0.
So, let's go to the next one. 5534, that's another call from Chase to you. And the elapsed time of 0 as well.
Yes.
Objectors to cumulative, ask and answers.
So, if we go down that line, the next one would be 5535. Well, let's go to the next, 5536. Do you see those series of calls there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 calls in a row from 1254 to 1257. Do you see those?
Actually, there's 7.
7, that's right, 7 in a row, right?
Yes.
And that's calls 5536 to 5542. You see that?
Yes.
If I can get this handy dandy to work here. Let's see. 5536. 5536. There you go. You see that? So
Yes.
starting there and going down 7 calls. What is the elapsed time of those calls on your record?
0.
Would it be safe to assume that there was no conversation during those calls?
I assume so, yes.
And then you called back with a call 5543. Do you see that one?
Yes.
And that's a call from you to Chase, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long did that last?
15 seconds.
Okay. So of all the calls that counsel directed you to using Chase's records, it's likely that there was not even any conversation between you and Chase, is that correct?
Objection leading.
Objection sustained is calling for speculation and conclusion.
Now, I want to just touch on coming to my office on Super Bowl Sunday. Was I happy about that?
Objection relevance.
I don't think so.
Okay. But I wanted you to listen to your interview.
Objection,
correct?
calls for speculation and leading.
Sustained.
Did I tell you I wanted you to listen to your interviews?
Objection hearsay.
What I did mostly at your office was listen to my interviews with detectives and phone calls, and there was probably 15 audio and video things that you wanted me to listen to refresh my memory of things that I said and conversations that I had with the police and detectives.
And we sat there and we listened. And we listened. Is that correct?
Objection, leading, and argumentative.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And we listened to your interview that these detectives did at the Glendora Police Department, right?
Yes.
That was on videotape
Yes.
and lasted hours,
Objection
right?
leading.
Sustained.
And we listened to your
Objection,
interview.
leading.
Did we listen to the interview on October 10th, 2014?
Probably. I don't know what that one refers to, but
And
we listened to a lot of them.
And it's, okay. And then we listened to those on Super Bowl Sunday, which was 2019, correct?
Yes.
And you were going to be a witness in a case in 2019 referring back to events and interviews you did in 2014 and 2010, is that correct?
Yes.
So, listening to those, did you want to also listen to those recordings for that purpose, for the reason that they were so long ago?
Objection, lead.
Not particularly, but it did help me to remember, certain things that I said and stuff, so.
I want to talk about what brought up the checks, do you recall that?
Yes.
And she said that, well, your testimony was that Chase told you about 3 checks. Is that correct?
Yes, that he brought home the day before.
Okay. I'm going to show you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to show you 5 checks, okay?
Okay.
And the exhibits are 420B, 420E, 420F, 420H, 420I. And I'm going to be up there in a minute, okay?
I'm
Okay.
going to object to foundation based on the testimony that she hadn't seen the checks.
I'll overrule at this time.
Take a look at those, please.
Okay.
Of those 5 checks, what are the dates on those checks?
Hearsay, Black's Foundation.
Overrule.
All of them are dated February 4th, 2010.
How many of those 5 checks are made out to Charles Merritt?
3.
And the other 2 are made out to Metro Sheet Metal?
Objection, foundation, hearsay.
Overrule.
Yes.
If Chase told you about 3 checks, would it be conceivable that Chase would tell you only about the 3 checks made out to him?
Objection, speculation,
And
foundation.
intentionally mistakes evidence.
The objection sustained is calling for speculation and confusion.
The council refers to another check as well. Check number 4240. I'll show you that.
I think this is what check.
Indirectly you did. So I'm gonna show you this check as well. There you go. This is it. What did you put on the back?
Okay.
What's the difference?
420G.
420. Now, what's the date on that check?
Objection, foundation.
Overrule.
February 2nd, 2010.
And at in the bottom portion there, it gives the date that that check was actually negotiated or posted. You see that? At the
Objection,
bottom.
foundation.
Sustained on foundation and hearsay.
Council referred to a email. Do you recall that?
I don't know what specifically you're referring to.
You were showing this an email that on February 1st, 2010.
Oh,
Exhibit 419.
from Joseph to Chase?
Correct.
Yes,
You recall that?
yes,
And she referred to some numbers on there, is that correct?
yes.
419 or wait, use this. Let's see if we can do it on the computer, it's easier to see. You see that?
Yes.
See if we can make the whole thing in there. Make it a little bigger if we could. Oop. Okay. So, on this email, before I ask you a question about this email, were you aware that Joseph and Chase had a running ledger regarding money that was owed to either Joseph or to Chase at any given period of time?
No,
This email, the council represented to you that it showed that $42,845 was owed to Joseph. Do you recall her mentioning that?
I don't think she specifically said that, but
But she showed you this and referred to this email and the numbers, is that correct?
yeah.
Okay. So, do you know what this means? Do you have any idea what these numbers signify?
Not really.
Okay. Do you know, on February 1st, do you know whether, when you see this line here where it says overpaid, 15,045,
Yes,
and there's some numbers above it that Chase was paid 173,000, and Chase was owed 158, so therefore at that, on February 1st, and it says as of February 1st, right? That there's an overpayment of 15,045, correct?
yes,
Objection, meeting and foundation.
Sustained.
Well, council showed you this email, right?
yes.
Okay. Do you know on February 1st whether or not Chase had been paid for the Saudi Arabia job and the Paul Mitchell job?
Objection compound.
Overruled, she answered, she knows.
I don't know.
If he hadn't been paid yet, we'd have to throw those numbers into...
Objection calls for speculation, since facts not evidence.
Sustained.
She mentioned Provecho. You remember that?
Yes. Or I think I did, actually.
Okay. And then we listened to a jail visit where Provecho was mentioned.
Correct.
Now, do you know about Provecho?
A little bit.
Okay. And was that a job? Do you know that it was a Provecho's is a chain or a restaurant? Did you know that?
Objection, meeting.
Overruled.
Yes,
what,
I knew Provecho was a restaurant.
What do you know about Provecho?
Like I said, it was a large waterfall that was being put in, or was put into a restaurant, and then Joseph was talking about suing them for the money that was owed because he ended up, I guess, not getting paid for it. One time when Chase and I were driving downtown, he actually pointed the restaurant out to me, so I didn't know where it was, but
Did you ever see the actual waterfall at any time?
when it was being built, yes.
I'm going to show you exhibit. $987. Do you know whether or not the Provecho waterfall was a big job or a small job?
It was one of the bigger jobs.
Do you know anything about if that waterfall was considered a good waterfall or a bad waterfall? What about McStay?
It was large and impressive. I mean, it wasn't anything that Chase hadn't worked on before. It was basically glass, metal, and sandblasting. Yeah, that looks like the waterfall. Yes.
And do you know whether or not Chase installed it and completed it?
I believe that's a picture of it in the restaurant, so yes.
Let's see if we can publish that. Oh, wait, here. And you recognize that as being the Provetro waterfall?
Yes.
Now, were you aware of whether or not that was at the time, in 2008 or 9, do you know when it was installed?
No, I'm not sure.
If you could just point out the features of this waterfall. You described it in the telephone or the visit as a 4-panel or something like that?
Yes.
Objection, misstates testimony.
Well, you described it in the jail visit, right?
Yes, I did.
What did you describe it as?
A four-panel waterfall or something like that. I knew it would have a lot of panels.
Okay, can you just point out what you're talking about when you're saying panels?
There's lines here in between the glass. Those are each separate glass panels.
And did this waterfall have multiple panels then?
Yes.
Yeah. And okay. Was this at the time in 2000? Do you know when it was installed?
I'm not sure, no.
At the time that this was installed, that Chase built this and installed this waterfall, was it considered a pretty big phenomenon to do something like this?
Objection, lacks foundation, knowledge.
Sustained with glass foundation, calls for speculation and conclusion.
Do you know if Provetro got any awards for this waterfall?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Do you know whether or not Joseph and Chase were paid for this waterfall?
Like I said, I believe Joseph was filing a lawsuit against the restaurant because
Objection, lacks foundation based on hearsay.
he had, or something happened and he didn't end up getting paid for it. I don't know if he got an initial payment or, how that worked out. I just know that once the waterfall was in the restaurant, there was a lack of payment and he was going to seek legal reparations.
So let me ask you this. Do you know whether or not Chase got paid for this waterfall?
I don't know.
Well, if Joseph didn't get paid, would Chase get paid?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
So, when you look at the email, and we can go back to 419. Do you know why, in this email that counsel showed you, do you know why when Joseph made this email, he separates out Provetro from the amount of the overpayment?
Objection, speculation and foundation.
Sustained.
Is one of the reasons Joseph separates it out is because neither Joseph or Chase even got paid for that waterfall?
Objection, speculation and foundation.
Do you know whether or not those amounts where it says Levine and Provetro are actually amounts that are not really owed, that they keep it as an off-balance sheet item?
Objection, speculation, foundation.
Sustained.
Now, regardless of what was, and Chase was talking to you about Provetro in your jail visit, remember that?
Yes.
Did Did Chase ever tell you to say something about Provecho that you didn't already know?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
No,
Did he ask you to lie about Provecho?
no,
Objection leading.
Overruled.
You knew what you knew about Provecho, and you testified to it today, is that correct?
We sustained. Be a good time to take our afternoon recess. Go ahead and take our afternoon recess, let's spend 15 minutes. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to film or express any, not to discuss the case, let's hear we go back and talk.